Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Salebox for the 13th of July 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit, rounding up your daily Steam deals. I apologize, this video is slightly late today. I've been very busy, as has Chris, who helps me put this video together. Regardless, let's get right into it, shall we? With a quick reminder that you will be able to pick up the deals from yesterday for a little while longer, basically until the 14th at 1 PM EDT when those deals would go off sale. So please do check out yesterday's Salebox if you want to know anything about those games. Okay, so let's kick it off, shall we, by looking at Tomb Raider. 75% off, taking it down to $12.49, €12.49, £7.49, and unfortunately in Australia it is $17.49. This is, of course, the most recent reboot of this particular franchise. It is not the first, certainly. There have been numerous attempts to reboot Tomb Raider, but this is the latest. Plays more like Uncharted than you would expect a Tomb Raider game to. It's more cinematic action as opposed to an emphasis on puzzle solving and platforming. In fact, most of the puzzle solving is entirely optional inside these 1 or 2 room tombs that you can actually go into in order to get artifacts. It is actually quite a fun game with a solid combat system. The cover system is quite nice in the sense that you don't have sticky cover. It basically puts you into cover automatically when you move along an area that should be used as cover. It is fairly QTE heavy and it's very scripted as well. I do have some issues with the narrative disconnection between the character and the game world and what you're required to do, but overall it's a really solid action adventure. What I will say about this deal is that what's hidden is in fact the best deal. And that is the fact that both Tomb Raider Anniversary and Tomb Raider Underworld, which are both really solid Tomb Raider games, are 80 cents each. Yes, ridiculously cheap. Tomb Raider Anniversary is an interpretation of the first game brought bang up to date, and Underworld, in my opinion, was a very solid title indeed. Underworld and Legend were a little bit weird because they were like the first reboots of this particular franchise, and they were a little bit more action-orientated. They had a few different mechanics and systems in there that were not present in the original games, but yeah, pretty much all of the old Tomb Raider games, like 91% off, with the exception of Legend, which wasn't that amazing anyway. So Underworld and Anniversary are the games that I would unquestionably pick up if you have even the slightest interest in Tomb Raider, whereas I would, for the most part, recommend the reboot of Tomb Raider as well. It has indeed only been out for a few months, so this is a pretty damn good discount. Stardrive takes it down to $10.19, €10.19, and £8.49. In my opinion, a very solid game. It did release in a state whereby the endgame didn't work very well. It had some fairly severe performance issues. The game does lack in certain areas, I have to say. The AI is hardly what I would call super smart, and the ship design system, while very in-depth, is also a gigantic time sink, which can be a little bit problematic. The game also lacks a large selection of endgame objectives, different ways to beat the game. For the most part, it's just a case of conquer the galaxy. It would have been nice if there were significantly more ways to do that. The game's a decent fun playthrough a couple of times, and it's got a ton of potential. The problem is it's only being worked on by one person, so the development is going to be slow regardless. What it does have is an excellent style to it, as well as extremely enjoyable real-time combat, which is something that most 4X games don't do. It's very much got an emphasis on the action, so if you're looking for something like that with a little bit more 4X than something like, say, Sins of a Solar Empire, then Stardrive may very well be for you. But it's definitely not the perfect experience. Age of Empires 2 HD, 50% off, takes it down to $10, €9.49, and £7.49. The actual improvements this game has graphically over the original are virtually non-existent. The fact of the matter is that it's anything but high definition. The resolution has been increased, but that doesn't make the game look any better, it just makes the stuff look smaller, which is not exactly ideal. Game's LAN mode has also been stripped out for some inexplicable reason, though it's now significantly easier to play online, which is a benefit for most people. I guess the problem with a title like this is that 13 years ago it was absolutely phenomenal, but this version hasn't really advanced it in any way. I want to say something controversial here and just say, look, games like, say, StarCraft Brood War were fantastic back in the day, but some of the limitations that exist on those titles can be irksome to some gamers these days. That's about as far as I would go with it. Just the idea of the way that the AI operates, the way that the units move, for instance, just jamming themselves into straight lines when you try to select a large number of them and move them across the battlefield. Some pathing issues here and there. The problem, I suppose, with taking a very old PC title and then saying, hey, here's the HD version, is perhaps that comes along with some expectation that the mechanics or the pathfinding or the AI will be polished up, and when they're not, people are disappointed. If you, however, are just looking to play Age of Empires 2 with a little bit of polish up when it comes to its visuals and a good, solid online multiplayer mode, then yes, by all means, pick it up. Though do bear in mind that on launch, this game had significant lag and multiplayer issues. I believe that's now been fixed, but the vestiges of it may still be present. Please do be careful in that respect. If you do have any doubts, then go and have a look on the Steam forums. They will tell you whether or not those issues continue to exist before purchase. I'm not going to pretend to know anything about RPGMaker VX. I'll just say that it's 66% off at $23.79, €20.39, and £16.99. Simple as that. So let's move on to Borderlands 2. 66% off. That takes it down to $10.19, €10.19, £6.79, and in Australia you're going to get shafted by paying $17. Now, the good thing about this deal is it also includes the DLC, more specifically the Season Pass, which is the best way of getting said DLC. There is an awful lot of DLC for this game, a kind of ridiculous amount. It, for the most part, is just cosmetic, so I wouldn't worry too much about any of it. The stuff that you want to be looking at is Captain Scarlet and her Pirate's Booty, Sir Hammerlock's Big Game Hunt, Mr. Torg's Campaign of Carnage, and Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. Now, if you were to buy those individually, you would not do all that well. I'm sorry. But if you were to buy the Season Pass, which is $10, then you will be saving yourself a little bit of money there. So that's how I would do it. Just bear in mind that the Season Pass does not include the cosmetic stuff, and it doesn't include the 2 extra classes either. So that game is definitely out to get an awful lot of post-launch cash out of you. The 2 packs you want to be looking at in terms of the characters are the Psycho Pack and the Mechromancer, which was a pre-order bonus initially. Psycho Pack and Mech will both give you separate character classes. As regards to the game itself, well, I mean, my opinions on Borderlands 2 are definitely not popular. It's mostly a case of saying, look, it's a bullet-spongy game of loot and silly humor. It's definitely got far more imaginative locales, but the questing is still kind of as lame as it ever was. If you like repetitive gunplay and loot whoring, then it is definitely the game for you. If you're into its sense of humor, then you will enjoy it an awful lot. It is colorful, it is nicely stylized. I just think it lacks an awful lot of substance. The simplicity of the character development doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. Only having a single activatable ability and a metric ton of passives is not that helpful whatsoever. And my experience of it with friends was that it was a case of pumping huge amounts of bullets into enemies to watch them go down, and I do hate bullet spongy enemies. That said, my opinion, as I said, is hardly the popular one. A lot of people really like Borderlands, and if you're looking for something to play with your friends, then you should certainly consider it. Heroes of Might and Magic 6, 66% off, takes it down to $10.19, €10.19, £6.79. Slightly more expensive in Australia for some reason at $11.87. This is a tricky one to recommend, honestly, because there is divided opinion when it comes to Hero 6. I should point out that Hero 6 Gold and Hero 6 Complete are on this list. Hero 6 Gold, definitely worth getting, as opposed to just getting it on its own. The reason why is because it will cost you the same amount and it will give you 2 adventure packs. It does not, however, give you the big expansion which goes by the name of Shades of Darkness, which adds on an additional race, which is kind of a big deal, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff. Hero 6 is standalone, but the way that they've set up the Hero 6 Steam page is very confusing. It's almost like it was designed specifically to sell you more than you wanted. You can get Shades of Darkness on its own for 50% off, which is a reasonable deal, and you don't have to get Hero 6 unless you want all of the extra campaigns, which is a metric ton of single-player content. There's a lot of disagreement on this one. I like it, but I don't think it's a better game than Heroes 5. I think it's technically more accomplished, it looks a lot better, it has a much cleaner interface, and it also has much faster turns. For some reason, even on high-spec machines, Heroes 5 took a long time to tick over turns with AI, and its interface was also hideous, but I do feel that Heroes 5 has significantly more depth, especially with both of the expansions. That helps an awful lot. If you want to know what it is, it's a turn-based strategy RPG whereby you explore the map, collect resources, build up your towns, creatures, level up your heroes, acquire magic items, slay monsters in a turn-based tactical combat game, and it's fantastic and a gigantic time sink, and it's really as simple as that. If you want to get into Heroes, some people would tell you to go for Heroes 3 directly, which is arguably the best in the series. You will not find that on Steam, I'm afraid. You will, however, find it on GOG. And Heroes 3 Complete over there is still a phenomenal game that still stands up very, very well on its own. I mean, it is just absolutely fantastic. However, if you're looking for something a little bit more up-to-date, then you can't really go wrong with Heroes 5 Tribes of the East, which is a standalone, as opposed to just buying the original game. I think that's great. Just bear in mind, again, that it has fairly slow turn tick over times, which can be annoying, and the interface is just horrible. I think it's mostly the font choice, more so than anything else that really did it in there. Regardless, I still think Heroes 6 is pretty good. It was dumbed down slightly with a removal of certain resources and things like that, but it's definitely a beautiful game. It's got some fantastic single-player content, and it's great in multiplayer as well. I should mention that this game does feature always-on DRM through the Uplay platform. Even though it would appear not to be, if you are offline, you are denied access to several fairly major parts of the game. So even though it claims not to be always-on, that's not really true. They just kind of dialed back on the requirements. It's still there, and that's something you should consider before deciding to pick up the title. Sniper Elite Nazi Zombie Army, 66% off, which takes it down to $5.09, €3.73, and £3.39. I don't like this game, and I wouldn't say necessarily outspoken, I just think I annoyed a lot of 12-year-olds by saying it. The reason I don't like it is because it's absolutely mindless junk that's based on the idea of co-op zombie slaying, yet has no actual co-op features of any real description. It's just shoot zombies with friends over and over and over again. And my god, do those animations start to get pretty damn boring after a while. They really do. 20 times out of 20, I would just say, look, get yourself a copy of Killing Floor. It's a way better experience as far as I'm concerned. But some people just like sniping zombies for some reason, and if you want to do that, then I guess this is the way to do it. I just think that you'd probably be better off in the horde modes of various other titles, because then you get a real game alongside it. Mars Warlogs, 50% off, takes it down to $10, €10, £7.49. I must admit to not having a huge amount of experience with it, but what I can tell you is the vast majority of reviews for this game were extremely middle of the road. The overall impression, which seemed to pop up in every review I read, was, this game definitely had some ambition, but it's very clear that they didn't have the skills necessary to fully implement it. They tried to do too much, and as a result, they lacked an awful lot of focus. So, very much average in every possible respect, I am afraid. So unless you are extremely enamored by the theme, I would recommend that you do not pick this title up for that price. Even though it is only $10, there are better games on the Steam sale for $10, and that is what it's being compared to right now. So, no, I'm afraid not. I mean, a universal consensus of this being painfully mediocre is definitely not a strong endorsement by any stretch of the imagination. Resident Evil 6, 50% off, taking it down to $20, €15, and £10. Ugh, man, this game got a lot of hatred, and kind of rightfully so as far as I'm concerned. Most of the reason why is that it was a massive deviation. I do mean a massive deviation from the idea that the series came from in the first place. It is an action game. There's no real question about that. It stepped away from its survival horror or even its survival action roots with Resident Evil 4 and 5 to be any other action game. And that's a shame, because that's not why I played Resident Evil in the first place. It also suffers on the PC for a number of different reasons, including very loose controls, so that's a little bit of a problem. It's the kind of game that, as far as I'm concerned, you should be playing with a controller, and that shouldn't be the case. It's a third-person action game. That should work perfectly fine with keyboard and mouse, and yet somehow it doesn't, which is not impressive at all. It does come with a bunch of extra content, including the No Mercy mode, characters from Left 4 Dead 2, and the Mercenaries, but there have been reports across the board of poor performance on several different system configuration types. Apparently the port is not very good at all, and AMD cards have been suffering particularly as a direct result of that. There's a laundry list of issues over on PCGamingWiki.com, so I would definitely beware of this title, I'm afraid. It is not what you were hoping for. Also on sale is Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Avoid Raccoon City like the plague, it's dreadful. Resident Evil 5 is pretty good. Admittedly, the port is very much middle of the road, and I would recommend playing it in co-op because the AI partner is goddamn dreadful. Otherwise, a reasonably decent survival action game, however. And that brings us on to the deal of the day, which I think a lot of you could see coming a mile away, and that would be The Witcher 2, Assassins of Kings Enhanced Edition, 75% off, which takes it down to absolute daylight robbery of $5, €5, and £3.74. One of the best modern role-playing games we've ever had on PC, one of the best looking games we've ever had on PC, stuffed with post-release support, huge amounts of content, and quite frankly, a nice and gritty story with plenty of awesome action and fantastic dialogue. It really is what you want from a modern role-playing game as far as I'm concerned. It is absolutely phenomenal, and for that price I would strongly recommend everybody attempts to experience it. You can read review after review after review just pouring praise on this game, and with very, very good reason indeed. And as far as I'm concerned, CD Projekt Red is one of the best devs and publishers in the PC scene right now, and very much deserves our support. Okay folks, that wraps me up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Salebox. Don't try and spend too much today. I'll be back hopefully at an earlier time tomorrow with yet more Steam deals. I'll see you next time.